And now I am so excited to, without further ado, introduce Kate DiLeo, who will be our guest speaker today. Kate is a tremendous founder in her own right. She is the CEO of her company. She is a best-selling author, just does incredible things, and has actually been working with Authentic and many of our clients for a number of years. She is truly good at what she does, and I can't wait to have her share a little bit more with you. So I'm going to turn the mic over to you, Kate, and let you share your slides.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me, everybody. I'm very excited to be here. So listen, I'm going to make this fast and furious. This is going to be a very quick 15 minutes, but I'll tell you just at a high level who I am. My name is Kate DiLeo, and I am a brand architect. I'm out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. And what I do is I partner with fast-growing companies, predominantly B2B service and SaaS companies, but certainly I've worked outside of that. My job is to get in there and help build the messaging and develop that go-to-market framework and brand architecture that really is going to drive revenue. And so that's my whole philosophy, is that your brand is all about revenue. And so today I'm going to share fast and furious some principles on brand. And so buckle up. This is going to be very quick. Hopefully we've got 5 minutes for Q&A, but I did share my deck with Jessica and the team. So if you do have questions afterwards, if it's kind of something that you're interested in learning more about, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to get to know you as a friend and just kind of build a relationship. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and share screen here. All right. So I hope everybody can start to see my screen. So what are we talking about today? We are talking about this idea of stop telling stories. Now, you might be going, what in the world are you talking about, Kate, as it relates to branding, and why wouldn't we be telling brand story? Well, I'm going to dig into what this looks like for your company today and how you can bring this back to your leadership teams and think about what would it look like to do that quarter turn, that tightening of the bolt of your message in order to drive revenue and achieve your goals. So let's get into it. The first thing that I want to do is talk about what the heck brand is, because I think I'm going to be really candid with you. I work in the world of marketing and branding, and when I hear this word brand, I think we also kind of just go, oh, it's so woo-woo and fluff, and it's about the color purple, wah, wah, wah. And you know what? I actually want to tell you that I have this philosophy that your brand is your path of least resistance to revenue. And the reason that I say that is because our organization's ability to clearly articulate in that first 30 seconds, you know, whether you meet somebody in the Zoom room or they hit the homepage of your website, whatever that looks like, our ability and our team's ability to clearly say, this is what we do, this is how we solve your problem, and this is how we're different. I think that's really the stuff, isn't it? That's going to compel that person to want to opt in and take the next step in the conversation into the buying cycle. And so I want us to think about this whole principle, that at the end of the day, when it comes to marketing for our organizations, stories do not compel people to buy. Conversations compel people to buy. And chances are the best sales that you've ever had come from building that relationship and that conversation. Now, in fact, I want you to think about walking into a room. Imagine that last face-to-face event you were at, and you shook hands with somebody, and they ask you, oh, so nice to meet you, you know, Bob, what do you do? Did you guys ever, have you ever launched into some complex story where you're like, well, let me tell you about the time I was 5 years old? And, you know, I've done that before. And you ever see like the eyes glaze over and you're like, oh, I lost them. On the flip side, have you ever told somebody, well, you know, I'm in marketing, I'm an integrator, I do operations, I do sales? Is that very compelling? Probably not, right? So what I want to teach you today is what can you say and what can your team say that's actually going to provoke a conversation with your target audiences and compel them to want to take the next step and buy. Because that's what we're all about here, is your brand does open the gateway to a conversation with your organization. And I'm going to teach you about a messaging model today that I'm known for. Very quick and dirty. It's called the Brand Trifecta, but it's really the 1, 2, 3 pieces that you need to know in your message right at the tip top of your content to ultimately get people to that next step, that conversion moment. Now, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put this all on the board. I'm going to just get right into this. Many of you have probably seen these pieces before at a high level and know what they are as it relates to marketing and sales. But in my world of branding, at the end of the day, especially if we're in B2B or technology, we need to be looking at 3 core things at the tip top of our content that will bring people through to the next step to want to engage with our organization. And that is a tagline, which really addresses the question of what do you do? Value proposition statement, which addresses here's how we solve your problem. And then a set of differentiator statements, really the big ways that you're different and better than the competition. What I'm going to do is walk us through each one of these, and I'm going to give a very silly but practical example to kind of have this hit home as to why this method actually works, because it's based on buyer psychology. It's simple brain science as to why we need to deliver our brand message in this order at the tip top in order to get people to want to go deeper into the rest of our content and into the rest of the sales conversation. Bottom line, this is a formula. A plus B plus C equals conversion moment. And whether your conversion moment, by the way, is click to call, fill out a form, hop on the discovery call, purchase on the site, whatever that is, right? We all have these conversion moments in our minds. This is going to bring somebody to that conversion moment that we're wanting them to take. Okay, so you ready? We're going to go through this one at a time. All right. And are there any Bobs in the room? Because I always use this name Bob as an example. And one time I had a Bob and I felt really bad about it. But here we go. We're going to pretend I'm in the room and we're talking with a guy named Bob. So imagine Bob and I come into the room and we're at the Chamber of Commerce in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and we shake hands. He's like, so nice to meet you, Kate. I'm like, so great to meet you, Bob. What is the first thing that Bob is probably going to ask me after he knows my name? What do you do? Tell me about yourself, Kate, right? What do you do? So if I just imagine I ran this example, by the way, imagine I were the CEO of a tax services company that serves small businesses. And imagine in this scenario that my ideal customer was Bob, Bob being the CEO of a small size company. He's doing a few million a year and he's busy. He wears a lot of hats and you know, it's really a founder-led organization. And Bob's like my perfect profile. And here I am, I run a tax service company just for people like Bob. So Bob and I are in this room and Bob asks me, well, Kate, what do you do? Now, if I just said to Bob, well, I do tax services. Is that very compelling? No. Instead, I'm going to serve up my tagline. I'm going to look at Bob and I'm going to say, well, Bob, I help make compliance effortless for small businesses. A little different, making compliance effortless. Tagline. So what is it? Your tagline is your first line of defense in the conversation. And what it really does is it addresses that first question that companies have when purchasing from you, which is, what do you do? It's the first thing that they want to know. Get to the point for me, right? Tell me what you do. Now, I'll tell you, here's some tips and tricks as we go through this. A great tagline, by the way, is super short. It's really precise. It's not a sentence, by the way. It is just boom, 5 or 6 words. This is what we do. For example, in my world of branding, I say that I build brands that win more work. Now, by the way, I'm in Minnesota, which is land of passive aggressive, and I'm a type A East Coast Italian. And whenever I say that, somebody in the room shudders. They're like, oh, oh, that was so pretentious. No. So let me just call this out, by the way. When we talk about branding, we talk about taglines and messaging. I want us to remember that we're walking this line between being pretentious and provocative. And I want us to be on that provocative side, meaning great brands, my friends, they create kind of that guttural emotional response, okay? It's not being a jerk. It's not being cocky, but it sure is going to be confident. I make compliance effortless. Talk about a claim, right? Okay. And it's really getting to the heart of this is what I do. So as you're sitting here as an individual today, what's your tagline? What's your company's tagline? Does it address the question of what you guys do, the value you bring? And here's the thing is if it's good, you know it's good because you've gotten a provocative response of the other person. So let's go back to that conversation with Bob. If it were Bob there and I said, well, Bob, I help make compliance effortless for small businesses. Have you ever given your tagline to somebody and they go, really? What do you mean by that? The head tilt, the lean in. What do you mean by that? You got them. Good job. That's a great tagline. That's a great delivery of something that provoked them. By the way, body language 101. I'm sure we've all seen the difference between that and the really, what do you mean by that? So we're looking for that lean in, provocation. At the end of the day, a great tagline should serve up number 2 of this brand trifecta formula. So what comes next? Your value proposition statement. So I looked at Bob and he's like, well, what do you mean by that, Kate, that you make compliance effortless? So I'm going to serve up point number 2. And it's going to expand on my tagline. It's going to ask that initial question. So I might say something like, well, Bob, the reality is that tax is a major priority for your business, right? But it does not need to be a major part of your day. So my job is to come on in, take that off your plate, and really ensure that you protect your credibility, relationships, and profits with free tax consulting. That's what I mean by making compliance effortless. Do you see how I addressed what I meant by that? It's addressing the what do you mean by that question. And it's getting at the heart pain we solve. It's creating that, oh my gosh, you get me moment. Actually, whenever I read that silly example to people like a CFO or CEO in the room, they're like, give me these people's number. So that's what a value prop does. It creates the you get me moment. But now here's what I want us to remember, and this is super important. At this point in the conversation with Bob, I've served up the first 2 pieces of my brand trifecta. Tagline, telling him what I do, value proposition statement, how I solve their problem. And 99.9% of the time, this is where most of us stop with our brand message. And then we move right into features and benefits and talking about the thing that we offer, right? Because logically, wouldn't it make sense that we would? Here's the thing. I want you to walk away knowing this big thing. Serving up a tagline and a value prop is not complete, and you're going to lose out on prospects self-opting in and converting because of what we call a comparison moment. In fact, Bob's not ready quite yet to hear about my amazing tax services. But why is that? Well, in this scenario, poor Bob is probably sitting there going, who is this crazy curly-haired lady that says that she, makes compliance effortless and can totally protect all this stuff for me? Wait a second, let me make sure I'm making sense of this. I just gave Bob a ton of new provocative data and information. And do you know what the brain does when it takes a new, highly provocative information? Do you know what it does to make sense of it? It puts it into a compartment or a box that it already has. It's going to compartmentalize it into something we already know, categorization. In other words, Bob is actually trying to compare me to my competition in this moment, and I want it to happen. And we all know this happens in a conversation when Bob looks at me and goes, so are you like TurboTax or H&R Block or, like PwC? I mean, he's trying to figure it out. He's trying to make sense of it. In my world of branding, people look at me and go, are you like an agency or a copywriter or a graphic designer? They're just trying to get it, my friends. And I want this to happen because what he just does right there is he serves me up beautifully to deliver the third and final part, which is differentiator statements. And here's the deal. Differentiator statements, sometimes called the 3 uniques, they're really that big 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 big bullet points of how you're better than the rest. So in this common conversation, I may look at Bob and say, oh my gosh, Bob, great question. I'm different. Here's how, right? We only focus on this size company. We have a proprietary process. We're super speedy. I clear it up for Bob. And here's the thing. It's only in this moment, once I deliver that third and final piece, that Bob comes to the point of conversion. And what is that point of conversion? The point of conversion is when Bob looks at me and asks the how, what question. So Kate, how does that work? What does that look like? How does that work? What does that look like? Here's the fascinating thing, my friends. When you get a how, what question verbally, congratulations. They've opted in to now want to know, tell me how you deliver on the promise. What's included? What's the features? What's the benefit? What's the price? This is actually scientifically, when we track the analytics on Google, this is where they go to your products or services page or your approach page. Like clockwork, you can watch the traffic. And that's where they go next. But the bottom line that I want you to take away today, some food for thought as you guys move into the rest of your day and this week, is I want you to remember that until you can deliver with your brand message, that brand trifecta, tagline, what you do, value proposition statement, how you solve your customer's problem, and differentiator statements, how you're different and better than the rest, your customers do not care yet about your amazing products or services, and that's okay. The goal is to create this for your brand at the tip top so that they automatically get there as quickly as possible, that they're opting in, and that you really are opening the gateway for them to go into the rest of your incredible content, to dig into the discovery call, to read the case studies, to go through the white papers, etc. Bottom line is that brand trifecta really creates self-selection and allows people to engage with your brand on their terms. So that's it. I said it was fast and it was furious. And so I hope that this is helpful for you. We're going to open it up. I think we've got a couple minutes for Q&A. I'll stop sharing screen. Again, my information's in the deck, which I think that Jessica and the team will send out.
Awesome. Yes, everybody will get these slides tomorrow in the recap email, so check that out. But while we have a couple more minutes of Kate's time, does anybody have a question they'd like to ask live?
Come on, somebody's got a question. Where's your
I'll ask a
coffee?
question.
Yes, please.
So, right, I've been helping my partner build a new brand for the last year, and every time somebody asks me what we do, I have a super wordy response, and I start explaining how it works before I do like the full trifecta you just described.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you, without getting into the details of what I do, like how do you, when you're working with a client and you ask them, what do you do? It's because you're trying to get to this tagline and they come at you with a paragraph. What's the process for like reducing and reducing and reducing until you have less than a sentence?
Yeah. So I'm actually going to tell you it's a bit of reverse engineering, Chris. If you're doing this work with your client, I actually will start them by nailing the value proposition statement first, only a couple sentences, then flesh out the differentiator statements, then flesh out the how it works stuff like features and benefits. And there becomes this icing on the cake moment at the very end that you're left with a core set of language that you haven't used yet. That is the big kahuna, the 5 or 6 words that's like, duh, sums it up. And it is your tagline. If you try to start with a tagline, you'll spend 35 years and 75 revisions later, and you're not going to have a tagline. So believe it or not, I leave that to the very end. If you're curious about how to maybe create a kind of a process for that, feel free to get a hold of me and we can chat about that offline.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good time maybe for one more question if anybody has one. Yeah, Evan, you're raising your hand. Go for it.
So I actually, just because I always swim upstream, I start with the differentiating response. And I put it in the chat before, but it's because it differentiates me from everyone else in the room. And so I always just start with, when someone says, what do you do? I was like, whatever my wife lets me. You know, that's because it's an icebreaker and it doesn't actually answer the question, but it kind of disarms the nature of the way that the conversation usually goes. And so then when they're like, no, really, so then I add my tagline. So, but I start with differentiator and then I go tagline. And that's where I say, I help entrepreneurs discover more freedom, more profits, and less frustration.
There you go. Great.
And then done. And then hopefully they lean in and say, well, how do you do that? Or tell me more.
Bingo. And so what you're getting at here, team, is a great point. Verbally, when we're in a conversation, right, that Evan's doing a great job using that kind of an icebreaker, that kind of provocative catch that gets them to kind of, wait, what? On a website, you wouldn't need that. You would just go right into your tagline, then your value proposition statement, then differentiators. But absolutely verbally, you can have some flavor there on the front end to bring them then down through the brand trifecta. Well said.
Thanks.
Awesome. Well, Kate, thank you so much. You just nailed the timing. And it was great that we got in a couple questions, but everybody will have access to Kate when the recap email goes out tomorrow. So keep your eyes peeled for that and definitely follow up with me if you don't get it or you have any questions, but I'm sure you'll have some follow-up folks curious about how you can help them, Kate.
Absolutely. And I'll drop my LinkedIn here as well as my email. Would love to just learn more about your businesses and always welcome a connect call to just see how we can support each other. So thank you so much for having me, Jessica, and the entire team. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's awesome to see you. Thank you.
Yeah.